Hello. So today I wanted to do a video talking about CpK data. I'm going to talk about what it is, what it's used for, and then my experience with it, what I use it for, and what I think of it. Personally, I'm not a fan of CpKs, but there's a lot of reasons why, so I'll get into that towards the end. In a nutshell, CpKs are... It's just a statistical measure of how efficient a process runs. Whether it's a machine, or you can use it for like spacing with, if you're like building like a car garage or something like that, you could try to figure out the CpKs on cars, how many cars you can fit, how well will they fit. I mean, I guess that's kind of like a goofy, I saw that as an example online, so maybe that's not a real use, I don't know. I know the purpose I use them for. So we, at my company, make jars and caps. This is actually an example of a jar and a cap that we make. I got a bunch more in here too. But yeah, so my CpKs are just basically used to verify the fit will be what you need it to be for the cap to mate to the jar properly. Anyhow, before we get into anything else, I found a very comprehensive article online that goes over CpKs in extreme detail. It's a very long article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Basically, I'm just going to skip around and do the highlights just to give you enough of the information, like the inputs that I need, what a CpK is, and how it's used, and yeah, in better words than my freestyle explanation of it. So let's get into that. Alright, so here's the article. It's found at sixsigmastudyguide.com if you're interested in reading more of what I skip over. But let's get into it. So, CP and CpK, they're basically the same, I think. I don't know. I don't do CPs, I do CpKs. So anyhow, they're considered short-term potential capability measures for a process. In Six Sigma, which my last company was hot on, unfortunately I never got Six Sigma qualified. I wanted to, but I never did. So anyhow, I'm not super familiar with what Six Sigma is. With what Six Sigma is. I just know it's something like for critical thinking purposes, to prove that you can critically think, I guess. Anyhow, in that we want to describe processes quality in terms of Sigma, because this gives us an easy way to talk about how capable different processes are using a common mathematical framework. In other words, it allows us to compare apple processes to orange processes. Process capability. This is a long article, but I thought it was important to keep CP and CpK together. CpK is addressed first, then CP. There are also crib notes on what the equations mean in a real performance sense, what you should be able to tell about a process depending on CP and CpK values, and more. If you're not finding what you are looking for, please let me know in the notes below. Okay, I'm going to skip some of this because this is a lot of crap that doesn't really matter. CP versus CpK, not what I'm looking for. What is CpK? There we go. What I am looking for. The parking a car in the garage analogy. Okay, so this is the crap I already referenced. I didn't know it was in the article that I was going to put on here. Oh well, this works, I guess. Think of the walls of your garage where you have to fit your car in. They become the customer specification limits. If you go past those limits, you will crash your car, and the customer will not be happy. When your process has a lot of variation, that means the process average is all over the place. Not good for parking a car, and not good for any other process. To give your parking process the best chance of success, you should work on reducing variation and centering. If the car is too wide for the garage, nothing you do to center the process will help. You have to change the dispersion of the process. Make the car smaller. Or you could make the area larger. If the car is a lot smaller than the garage, it doesn't matter if you park it exactly in the middle. It'll fit and you'll have plenty of room on either side. That's one of the reasons the Six Sigma philosophy focuses on removing variation in a process. If you have a process that is in control and with little variation, you should be able to park the car easily within the garage and thus meet customer requirements. CpK tells, that's interesting. CpK is lowercase. So my company, we set up we have a CpK sheet. It's a full-on formula, kind of. Like, we just plug in values, and for the most part, the sheet figures everything out for us. But they put it as C, what do you call it? Not lowercase, but subset P, and then back to normal K. But apparently it's big C and then those two are small. Didn't know that. I mean, honestly, I don't even know anything about CpK before this company. I never even heard of CpK. I'm a professional in CpKs. Now I do them all the time, but before this company, I never... It was all new, so I didn't know that CpK was wrong until now. Anyhow, it tells you the relationship between the size of the car and the size of the garage and how far away from the middle of the garage you park the car. Does it? I don't know. How to calculate CpK. So I could tell you this myself, but I feel like I'd be all choppy if I was trying to discuss this based on my personal experience. So this will be a lot more better. Well, a lot more better? Is that proper grammar? Probably not. It'll be a lot more efficient, let's put it that way, to read an article where somebody who actually professionally knows what they're talking about describes this. So, CpK is a measure to show how many standard deviations the specification limits are from the center of the process. So I suppose in my world, with jars and caps, the center would be the nominal dimensions. So say, you know, we're looking for a diameter of 2.5 inches. That would be my center. Versus this example they provided with the garage, it would be like parking the car in the dead center of the garage. On some processes, you can do this visually. Others require an equation. I've never done it visually. It's always been with an equation. To find CpK, you need to calculate a z-score for the upper specification limit and a z for the lower. So anyhow, basically what these are is you have a tolerance spread. Typically, ours will be like plus or minus 7 thousandths. So the upper specification limit is the nominal plus or minus 7 thousandths. So back to the 2.5. It would be 2.5. So the upper would be 2.507 and the lower would be 2.493. Those would be our limits. Since we are trying to measure how many standard deviations fit between the center line and the specification limit, you should not be surprised that the value of those limits, the process mean, and the standard deviation are all components of the z calculation. CP is an abbreviation. There are really two parts, the upper and the lower, denoted CPU and CPL respectively. Yes. Their equations are CPL is the process mean minus the LSL divided by 3 times standard deviation, and the CPU is the same but with the upper. CPK is merely the smallest value of the CPL or CPU denoted. CPK is the minimum of that. Yeah, so whichever one's, as it says, is smaller, which that's true. That's sometimes my the way we have our formula set up, it goes CPL the upper than the no, how do we do it? Yeah, we do upper than lower than CPK, and a lot of times it'll be like the same exact thing as the lower. So it goes lower is one number, CPK is the same exact number. Why are we dividing by 3 to find CPK? I'm like, we know that any specification limit has an upper bound and a lower bound. Because you know that 6 sigmas, or 6 standard deviations, account for nearly all eventualities on a process, assuming normal distribution, you shouldn't be surprised to see the divided by 3, because we're only looking at one side of the distribution. Yeah, so in total you get the 6 from the upper and the lower, but per side you only need 3. Calculating CpK using a z value. If you have a z value, the equation is very easy. CpK can be determined by dividing the z-score by 3. A z-score is the same as a standard score, the number of standard deviations above the mean. Z equals x minus mu over phi, whatever. I think that's phi, right? Z equals x minus mean of the population divided by the standard deviation. I'm a little bit confused. I'm trying to think. Is the standard deviation... What actually is that? I'm trying to think of the ones that I use at work. What is the standard deviation? Is that the overall spread of the variables? Is that the overall tolerance range? So in my situation with the 7 thousandths, would that be 14 thousandths? Is it how many cases you do? So say you have 100 samples. Is that divided by 100? What actually... I don't want to click on that and lose this article, but... I'm going to have to. Because how are we going to learn if I don't know? I can't explain it, so... Standard deviation is used to measure the blah, blah, blah. Variation in process of 2 times. Sample and population. Whoa, look at these sexy formulas. Sigma of xi minus mu squared over n. calculate the mean of the data. Okay, here it is. How to measure the standard deviation for a sample. Standard deviation for a sample. 1. Calculate the mean of the data set, x bar. 2. Subtract the mean from each value in the data set. 3. Square the differences. Oh, this is just going through those formulas up there. Cookies, chips per batch. Wow, chips per cookie in a batch, depth of a river. How to measure the standard deviation for a population. Don't care about that. Here we go, finally. That's an example. Nana's Bakery wants to optimize the consistency of their cakes. The recipe calls for a certain number of eggs. The problem is that there is a variation in egg sizes. 6 eggs were randomly selected, and the following weights were recorded, measured in ounces. 2 1/4, 1 3/4, 2, 2 1/2, 1.8. What is the standard deviation of the egg weights? So, X, that's the weights. 2.1, blah, 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 difference squared. X bar, 2.1. N6, X bar, 2.1. Okay, so what was X bar again? Man, this is not helping me at all. God. I haven't done standard deviation in years, so I don't even know what the heck this means. You know what, this is just wasting time. I have no idea. This isn't helping, so whatever. Some kind of standard deviation thing. If a process is perfectly centered, it has a CP of 1. That would indicate that mean was 3 standard deviations away from the upper limit and the lower limit. A perfectly centered process, a process who has a mean exactly in between the two specification limits, meaning halfway between the two, will have a CpK of 1. How is this possible? Let's check the math. If a process is perfectly centered, then we know that the upper minus process mean equals the same thing as the process mean minus LSL. Let's call that A. ZUSL equals USL minus process mean over standard deviation. Then becomes USL equals A divided by standard deviation. The same exact thing. Well, yeah, you just changed up what USL minus process means and called it A. Of course it's the same. Notes on CpK. CpK measures how close a process is to performing compared to its specification limits and accounting for the natural variability of the process. Larger is better. The larger CpK is, the less likely it is that any item will be outside the specification limits. So here's what we usually go by. We go by 1.33 is what we look for as our CpK. Anything over that is good. Sometimes it gets as high as pushing 3. And I feel like, is this too high? Sometimes it's like wicked high, like pushing 6. And I'm like, is this ridiculous? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's good. It's over 1.33. But that's what we need to go for. Anything under that counts as no good. And then you either got to deal with that or with the customer, or you got to try to figure out how to fix it internally. When CpK is negative, it means that a process will produce output that is outside the customer specification limits. When the mean of the process is outside the customer specification limits, the value of CpK will be negative. We generally want a CpK of at least 1.33, 4 sigma or higher, that's exactly what I just said, to satisfy most customers. CpK can have an upper and lower value reported. If the upper value is 2 and the lower is 1, we say it has been shifted to the left. See, here's something different. When I do CpKs, I only have 1 value. This is making it look like there's 2. Or is this just saying, oh, I see. This is comparing the upper and the lower. I never compare upper and lower. I don't care. I just care about the CpK value. Maybe I should start studying that. This tells us nothing about if the process is stable or not. We must report the lower of the 2 values, which is what happens. I said that earlier. Mustang smashing into a cheap-looking garage. That was poorly centered. What are good values for CpK? Remember the car parking in the garage analogy? CpK equals negative number. Your process will regularly crash the car into the wall. CpK equals half. You have a good chance of hitting the wall on entry. CpK 1. Your car may be just touching the nearest edge of the entry. CpK 2. Great! You have great clearance. You could double the width of your car before you hit the side of the garage. CpK 3. Excellent! You have excellent clearance. Wow, that came out weird. You have triple the width of your car before you hit the side of the garage. Alright, this goes on now, I think, to just talk about regular CPs. For the purpose of this video, we don't care about CPs at all. So, that's it for this article. Back to me. Alright, so that's basically the overview, an intelligent overview on what CPKs are. I'm kind of frustrated and, I don't want to say embarrassed, but I guess for lack of a better word, embarrassed that I don't know what standard deviation is or how to calculate it. I should. I have a bachelor's in math, and I really like math. I do it for fun. There's meetings that I have at my job that I'm just so boring that I don't need to be in, but they invite me to it anyways just because I'm the head of engineering. And I'll start making up math problems just to like entertain myself. And I don't mean like wussy math problems like, hey, what's 2 times 3? I mean like I come up with calculus equations just off the top of my head, just anything. Just throw down some numbers and see if I can solve it. And yeah. So I should know what the heck a standard deviation is. I think I'm only confused because I'm just way overthinking things. That's what I've come down to as my conclusion, why I'm confused on that. Because like I said, at my job, we have I don't want to call it a spreadsheet, but for lack of a better word, we have a spreadsheet that basically does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. We just plug in values and then it figures out everything as far as CpK is concerned. So I think I'm just thinking about that and how I don't need to figure out what the standard deviation is, and then I'm trying to think of what standard deviation is when I'm reading that article, and I'm thinking of every single variable and factor that's in the CpK report, and I'm like, what is the standard deviation a standard deviation of? Is it of all the sample set? Is it of the tolerance spread? Is it of the value minus the nominal and then an average of that? I don't know. Anyways, it doesn't matter. I'm talking about CpK, not standard deviation. So, yeah, so that's what CpK is for. Now, I don't usually have to do CpKs. So my company is a company that has been around for over 100 years. We have some prints hanging up on the engineering walls that are there's one that's from 1919, and there's another one from 1921, I think it is. Those are probably the oldest 2 prints that we have. And then we have an engineering closet full of all kinds of archive stuff over the years. And there's some in there that are from the 30s, 40s. It's actually funny because, speaking of the 40s, like we have stuff that's like World War II propaganda with, it's kind of weird thinking about a container industry going through World War II propaganda, but I found it and I'm like, this is kind of cool. I mean, it's like a piece of history, if you will. But anyway, so I said my company's been in business for 100 years, but it was part of a much bigger company, and then I think it was like the 50s I think it was the late 50s. Yeah, because that's what the alarm code used to be. The alarm code used to be the year that the company got bought out from the larger company. So it was something in the late 50s. I don't remember what now. 56, I'm thinking? Doesn't matter. It's not the alarm code anymore. We all have our own individual personal alarm codes now. We got a whole new system, so. But the old one, I think it was 1956 was the alarm code. And that was because that was the year that the company was bought out. So anyway, it's a mom and pop place now. The owner of my company now is actually that guy's grandson. So the original guy bought it out in 56, and he ran it until, I think he ran it until maybe like mid-80s? Mid to later-ish 80s. I'm thinking like 87 is when it switched over, somewhere in that range. And then it was the current owner's father was running it until recent. I got with the company in 2019, and I think the owner that we have now got in the company in 2018. So like he's kind of new as well. It's funny because even though it's a company business, he was largely out of it for a while, from what I understand. He really only came back a year or 2 before he took over. So I guess that was his dad's plan. Hey, I want to retire, so are you going to take this or am I selling? Anyways, so in any case, we do have a fair amount of years of experience in being in business, whether you want to say from 56 on or you want to say from 1919 on. And this is what we've been doing all along, just making jars and caps and stuff. But anyway, so the CpKs I don't have to do all the time. We have a lot of large customers. I mean, we largely service the cosmetics industry, and one of the cosmetic giants is very picky and annoying for me. And that's where I have to do CpKs. Now, the reason why I hate doing CpKs is because they take a long time. I need a large sample, anywhere between 100 and 125 parts. So that would be like 100 to 125 caps. And you have to take 3 dimensions, the T dimension, the E dimension, and the H. And unfortunately, my company's kind of old-fashioned. Like, we're coming around to getting with the times, if you will, but we are largely old-fashioned. I mean, right now, like, the brain of the company is this software called the AS400, which was purchased in 73. It's 2021, we're using 73 technology. Like, what is that, almost 50 years? Yeah, it's 48-year-old technology. And, like, so anyways, down in engineering, there's a lot of cool stuff available. Like, from Keon's, I actually... I don't know. It was me and the last head of engineering before he left. We were trying to get a machine from Keon's that you basically just put your part there. So in this case, like our cap, and it will take tons of measurements for you. And of course, it'll be ridiculously accurate because it's a machine. And then you can set a program, and then every time you have a similar size cap, you put it there, pull up your program, boom, the thing goes to town. It even has the capability to like see through the caps, so it can give you like an overall height as well. Because even though the thing's up here, like it's like a laser or something, and it can see to the bottom to where its base is that it's sitting on, and that's how it determines the height. I think that depends on the transparency though. Like I don't think you could do it on this cap because it's black, but something like this it would be able to do. But anyhow, for some reason we never got one, and there was a lot of bonuses going on. The company was giving us, we never even had any interaction with Keon's before, and they were giving us all kinds of like promos and such, and there was a grant from the state, and there was something else going on. We could have basically got a $100,000 machine for free, and for some reason it didn't happen, which sucks. So anyway, what am I left to do when I do my CpKs? Calipers. And so it just takes forever because like I want to make sure that my CpKs are accurate. So I take the measurements 15 million times just to try to get an average. And if I got to do this for 100, 125 parts, it takes forever. The last time I did a CpK, it took 3 days. 3 solid days. That's 24 hours worth of time just to do a stupid CpK report. So I hate CpKs. I also hate CpKs because the interaction, I mean the CpKs for this are for the interaction between the T's and E's on a jar and the T's and E's in a cap. And the way that caps and jars are designed, there's clearance between the two. You have about 30 thousandths clearance. That's 15 thousandths per side between the jar and the cap. That's why this happens if it's not all the way screwed down. You know, it's loose. It's on purpose. It's a design intent. It's also got the clearance so then you're not binding and it's smooth. You're not too tight and you're not too loose so it's not catching. But there's enough. So it's like, I hate when I have to do CpKs because I feel like it's overkill. Like, I feel like CpKs are best used for like machines. If a machine is running and you want to make sure that it's going to consistently drill a hole to a certain diameter after X amount of holes being drilled, that's what you would use a CpK for. Okay, I have this one drill bit, I did it 100,000 times. What is my CpK? Oh, it's good still. Okay, so my machine's very reliable. But something like this, the CpKs is severely overkill. It's almost, I can't even say it's overkill, it's almost a moot point. I feel like CpKs on this don't matter. Like, I gotta get into a little bit more before I keep carrying on. So I keep mentioning the T's and E's. I want to talk about that just so that you know what a T and an E is and everything when it comes to jar and cap design. So let me look at another article with you guys really quick, and then I can come back and talk about why this is overkill and a waste of my time. Okay, so the T and the E have to do with, as they call it, like the cap and jar neck finishes. That's where the thread is, the neck, if you will. For the most part, we go by the GCMI standard. GCMI is, I forget what that stands for, but it's glass something. It's some kind of standard that's been established, and most companies follow that. My company developed its own proprietary line back in, I don't know, a while back. It sells, people do buy it. I kind of think it's stupid because it's weird. Like, who would want to be tied down to us? Because it's the way it's designed is you can't fit a GCMI cap onto a one of our proprietary jars, or reverse. If you have a GCMI jar, you can't I mean, you know what I mean. You need both. You need both of our proprietary to make it fit. You can't have our proprietary jar with a GCMI cap. You can't have a GCMI jar with our proprietary cap. It's not going to work. So, anyhow, how to identify closure sizes? Screw thread caps or continuous thread closure sizes are expressed with two numbers separated by a slash. So what that means is like you'll have something that's 58 400. So this goes by millimeters. So the 58 it's a 58 millimeter cap. Slash 400 means that is the cap style, the H style, the neck style. So there's 400, there's 410, there's 415. That's mostly the numbers that we use. Then there's other sizes as well that I'm not super familiar with because I don't have to use them. But like a 400 is very standard. That's your standard regular cap. Like that one that I keep showing as an example, that's a 400. I think that's a 66 400 that I'm showing you guys. Basically a 410 is extra tall. So for the most part, that's like a bottle cap that would be extra tall. And the 415 is, I don't even know what a 415 is offhand. I don't think we even offer any 415s at my company now that I think about it. But anyhow, the first number refers to the diameter in millimeters measured across the inside of the cap's opening or the outside of the bottle threads. The second number refers to the thread style. The closure industry does not necessarily adhere to the same standards, so it is often best practice to purchase containers and caps from the same manufacturer when possible. Yeah, that's kind of what I said. I mean, as long as it's GCMI, you're good. It should fit. It's like light bulbs. You know, you can buy any light bulb. It's going to fit your outlet because it's a standard thing. That's kind of what GCMI is. But I see what they're saying. Anyhow, standard neck measurements. So, as you see in the picture, let me just zoom in on this a little bit. That's my world right there. T is the outside of the threads on a jar. On a cap, it's the opposite. T would be the inside of the threads because that's where the outside of the jar threads is hitting or would hit in the cap. E is the inside of the threads, basically the actual neck, like if you ripped the threads off. Again, that's the opposite on the cap. That is where the outside of the threads are. I, that's just the inside. They don't have like a transparent view here, so you can't really see, but that's like the inside, so the inner diameter. H is the overall height of the neck finish, the thread area. But yeah, so S stands for start of threads. So anyhow, T dimension, the outside diameter of the thread. The tolerance range of the T dimension will determine the mate between bottle and closure. E, outside, the difference between the E and T dimensions divided by 2 determines the thread depth. Yes. I dimension, the inner diameter of the bottleneck. Specifications require a minimum I to allow sufficient clearance for filling tubes. Linerless closures with a plug or land seal and dispensing plugs and fitments require a controlled I dimension for a proper fit. Alright, so this says linerless closures. Basically what that means is a cap. You know how you open a cap and there's always like that paper or a little plastic thing inside the cap? That's the liner. Like when I say plastic thing, I'm thinking like a soda bottle. You know, you take that off. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was in middle school, all the girls would take those out and core them out and like make cheap, fake, weird bracelet things out of those. So you know what I'm talking about? Or like anything else. There's that paper liner, like Juice or something might have it. Basically, the liner is just there to make a tighter seal. Make a tighter seal that doesn't cause mechanical interference with the actual jar and the cap. So the jar and the cap can be designed a certain way, and then you put the liner in there, which usually is some kind of like pulp, squishy, soft material. So as you're threading down and closing the jar, you can still close to the max depth that the cap and jar will allow you to close, but you get that nice extra seal when the jar is basically crushing into that liner. So that's what it means when they say linerless. If you have one that doesn't have a liner, as far as my company goes, we rarely make anything linerless. I've been there for almost 2 years now. Next month, December, will make 2 years. I don't think we've ever sold anything linerless yet. We've sold things glueless. Most liners are glued in. We've sold some that are glueless. Like, again, that example that I've been showing, that is a glueless lined cap. But in order to go glueless, you need to have a special thread. Now, it's still GCMI, but the way that you design it has to be a little bit different so that then the liner doesn't fall out. You also have to have special custom liners that are a little bit larger than you would normally need, again, so that then there's interference with the threads. So you have to have the threads a certain way so you can get the liner to pop in, and then you need to have the liner to be big enough so it doesn't just fall out. but it works pretty good once you get it all figured out. S dimension, measure from the top of the finish to the top edge of the first thread. The S dimension is a key factor that determines the orientation of the closure to the bottom and the amount of thread engagement between the bottle and the cap. There's also an N dimension. Basically, the N dimension is the opposite. Well, I don't want to say the opposite. The N dimension is the same thing as S dimension. Wait, I'm not saying this right. Hold on. The N dimension is to a cap what the S dimension is to a jar. So basically, the N dimension is where the threads start on a cap, where the S dimension is where the threads start on a jar. Why they have different values or letters, I don't know. Because a T and an E and an H and an I, they're all the same on both jar and cap. So I don't know why there's S for jar and N for cap, but typically a cap is only 30. Maybe that's why they make it different, because a cap is typically just 30 thousandths. That's usually what I see for N's. Unless it's like extra tall, then yeah, then it depends. I've seen some as big as like 300 thousandths is the N, like a bottle cap. So maybe that's why, though. N's are kind of standard, but S can vary. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Anyhow, H dimension. The height of the neck finish, measured from the top of the neck to the point where the T extended down intersects the shoulder. Common GPI, SPI neck finishes. So yeah, this is what I want to say. So the first one is a 400, the second one's a 410, the third one's a 415. What is it? Oh yeah, that's what 415 means. Extra tall and with a little bit extra thread. So a 410 will have like a normal amount of thread, but it's just extra tall, where a 415 has a little bit more. Like as you see, this technically has 2 full revolutions, where the 400 has 1 and the 410 maybe has 1.5. As far as these other ones, I'm not entirely sure what they are. That last one I think is like a custom. Oh no. One of these is like a modified semi-buttress. Not the last one. The last one's weird. Did they actually talk about what these are? Oh yeah, here we go. I actually have this PDF in my office. I don't know if I got this off this website. I don't think I did. This is Pipeline Packaging. I don't know if I should really be looking at this. Apparently, they're like a competitor of us. They're not a competitor directly, but they do the same thing as us. But my website doesn't talk about this stuff, my company's website. But yeah, I think I have this PDF. Anyhow, as you see, the 400s, that 410, 415. Is that really what that's supposed to mean? 400 means 1 thread turn, 410 means 1.5. I never realized that before, because sometimes I go like 1 1/4 or something on a 400. I just do as much thread as I think is relevant. I didn't know there was actually 1 turn, 1.5 turns, 2 turns, extra tall. 425, 2 turns, narrow threads. 2 turns, narrow threads. Huh. I'm just thinking, because that almost sounds like our proprietary line. Maybe we're not as proprietary as we think. 430, buttress finish, thick threads, and a top bead. So basically what a buttress is, it's a different style of threads. So you have, for us, the threads are usually similar angles. Like maybe you design it with 2 30-degree angles, so you have a 60-degree between the two. This one would be like the top is a 45 and the bottom's only a 10. It's kind of a custom style thread. And then a 2000 is lug finish, non-continuous threads. I don't think we're ever going to need to use that. We've never actually done 430s or 425s. I guess we've done 415s. That sounds like something we've done. I don't recall any products offhand that we have, but... Okay, so that's the T and the E. And how it mates. See if I can show you what the N, what I was trying to explain verbally. So the N right there, the N would be right there on a cap, right where that thread is starting. This is also one of those special caps I was talking about that end up being glueless, not linerless, but glueless. Anyhow, so why actually I have to do CpKs is one, this customer, it's for these caps, actually. We have, I think there's 5 sizes of this, but there's 3 that are like our biggest sellers. There's this size, this is like the medium size. There's one that's a little smaller, and there's one that's like double this size. This is like their top line for like their expensive line. From I understand, like a jar of the small one's like $100. It's ridiculous. It's kind of funny though when you consider that like we make the packaging that goes for $100 cream. But anyway, so these always need CpKs. So what happened is the customer wants us to increase our volume significantly on this size specifically. The other two sizes, I don't want to say they've canceled them, but they've said, we're not going to worry about those for now. Bang these out for us. These are what we want. So we have to essentially double our tooling. So far we've made 10 more sets of cavities, or stacks, I mean. A stack is what makes this. You have the cavity that goes on the top, the core that goes in the middle. And then the plates that hold the cavity in the core, and then you assemble that into the press. So we made 10 more, and we need to make 10 more, which that's actually coming along. We have the cavities all done, plated and everything. When I say plated, I mean we've got to put a chrome plating into the cavity, and we got to put it on the thread area on the core. It's just that then it doesn't stick. If you didn't do that, it's just going to stick to the steel. So those are 100% ready to go, and then we have cores that are largely ready to go. All they have to do is get threaded. The toolmaker didn't thread them because this customer has a different thread profile that they want to potentially move forward with. We've already made samples and such of that new thread profile probably a year and a half ago at this point, so like it kind of exists, but it's not mass produced. It was just for testing. So potentially next year sometime, maybe by summer, they're going to want to switch to that. So we had bought a lot of steel so that we would be ready for when that time came, because the customer's actually going to pay for this. So like it's free tooling for us, if you will. But anyway, instead, in the meantime, they want us to make a ton of this style thread. So yeah, what happens is I now have to do CpKs for these new sets just to qualify them. Is that the word I'm looking for? I think it's qualify them with the customer. So do my CpKs and present it to them and say, yeah, we're good, we can mass produce these and you should be fine with your jars. Anyhow though, that's this round of CpKs. The CpKs that I've done in the past are because this cap goes along with a glass jar. Now we're here in the United States making these, but they get their glass jars made somewhere in Europe. I think it's Germany. So, you know, two separate everything. We're using inches, they're using metric. It's different people, different engineering standards, different everything. And so what's happening is when the product is filled in the jars and it's being assembled, so they have an assembly line. Basically, I think what happens is, I'll just use this one for an example to talk about it. I think it goes something like this. It's on the assembly line, it comes up like this, and then it meets. Boop. And then it comes down, and then straight, and then there's like something that it runs through that screws the cap on, and then it continues. Well, what's happening is when this cap is going through, it's coming up, it's hitting the glass jar, boop, and then it breaks off, and then you end up with a chunk missing out of one of these sides. So because it's our cap that's breaking, they're trying to blame it on us that we are out of spec. I don't know if they've gone after the jar company. We're thinking that they haven't for the longest time. We were fighting hard about this, that it's not our cap, because for one, I don't know if you can really hear that, but these caps are a thermoset material, so they are solid. Like, I could probably whip this across my room and it wouldn't break. First off, it has a thick cross section for a cap. I mean, there's proprietary information on the inside, so look at that. That's pretty thick. Compare it to this one, just for a comparison. It's a thick cap. Like, it's not just gonna casually break. And we've been making these forever. This is not only this specific company's biggest product line that we make for them, but it's something we've been making forever, and there's never been any problems. So we're thinking the reason why it's breaking, I think it's our caps that's breaking. Is it our cap or is it their jar? Pretty sure it's our cap. That's why they're coming down on us. But anyways, what we're thinking is it's their process of how they are putting these together. When it's coming up like this, we're thinking there's too much pressure here. The glass in this, there's too much pressure, and so it gives. So we're thinking you need to, it's not anything to do with our cap. Our caps are perfectly fine. You need to come up with a better system that doesn't cause so much tension in a small area, like we're in high heels on the floor. You know, it's a lot of pressure on the heel. That's basically what's happening, we think. So I had to do CpKs for that, and I did, and then we made them pass to prove like our product is fine. But anyways, the thing with CpKs that I don't like doing is because, as I said before, there's already a tolerance spread within the caps and jars. It's about 30 thousandths difference. So our tolerances, again, are plus or minus 7. So we always have well, actually, if you do plus or minus 7 on the jar and the cap, you're at worst, you're looking at a 14 difference. Say there was, you know, the T on one of them was, how does this go? I always forget. The T was on the outside, so the T on the inside. So yeah, so say this was in 7 thousandths and this was out 7 thousandths, that's a 14 thousandths. Well, when you have 30 thousandths between the two, you still have 16 thousandths clearance. Like, these are not touching no matter what, even on the extremes. So for one, I feel like the CpKs are stupid. It's not going to prove anything. And then for two, the CpKs are very fickle. Every single CpK I've ever done, the dimensions I come up with, actually I should talk about this one since this is the problem cap, but the dimensions are always within tolerance. Whether it's a low end number or high end number, it's always within our tolerance spread. I've never had numbers that are way out, like, holy crap, I see why there's a problem. This one's way out of spec. It's always within spec. It might not be nominal, but it's still within our tolerance, which means the cap is perfectly fine. So the problem is, though, is, again, from what we went over earlier, CpK goes by, it takes the lower number of the upper or the higher average thing. So say you get a lot of numbers that are on the low end, it's more towards the low side of the tolerance. Now that's your CpK, and now it's saying it's 0.78, say. Well, you need 1.33. So now, according to the CpK, your caps look like they're bad, but they're not. Every single number is within spec. So it's almost counterintuitive, I think, for us to have to do CpKs. I get it, it's something that we can present to our customer to make them happy, but it's a dumb metric. Like I said earlier, it makes more sense with like a machine, something to prove like, yeah, I've done 1 million holes on this and it's still within spec. Then that proves, oh, okay, yeah, your machine's awesome. Something like this, though, it's like, I'm within spec, and the CpK says I'm not. So usually what we do, because our caps are technically within spec since they're within tolerance, so it's dumb if it fails, what you do is you just mildly manipulate something. There's been times where my CpK report for the TE and H is all out of CpK acceptance, and I changed the tolerance by 1,000. So instead of plus or minus 7, I make it plus or minus 8, and the H is normally plus or minus 5, I'll make it plus or minus 6. Boom, everything's perfect. Everything's green. Well, I say green because we have it color coded, so if it's a good number above 1.33, it's green. Anything low, it's red. So all of a sudden everything becomes green, and it's like, really? Like, I changed it by 1,000th. That's half a thousandth per side. I mean, I'm pretty sure, how thick is a hair? I think a hair is like 2 thousandths. So this is 1/4 the thickness of a hair is what I changed per side on the tolerance spread, and all of a sudden everything's good. Like, that's nothing. So it kind of just, I don't know, that's why it just makes it so the CpK is pointless, and that's why I hate doing it. It takes forever, 3 days at least. I gotta do it all manual, and it's kind of like bullcrap data. But yeah, basically this is on my mind because, like I said, I got those CpKs coming up that I really don't want to do. Luckily for now, our presses are full. We have 19 presses, but they're full. Everything's running with something. We don't have anywhere to put these new stacks at. So that's getting me off the hook for now, but when the time comes, I'm not looking forward to it. It was originally all 3 sizes too, the smaller one and the larger one, and I was like, oh my word, this is going to be like 3 weeks of CPKs. Luckily, they changed it to just this, so it's only 1 set of CPKs, but still, that's half a week that I'm going to be sitting there doing CPKs, and I hate it. And then I'll probably have something that's red, and then I got to dick around with it and very slightly manipulate it. I think, actually, so a lot of times I'll add a thousandth. I think one time we added half a thousandths to the tolerance. We made it like 0.0075, and that did the trick. That's a quarter of a thousandth per side. That's nothing. You could go, oh, I blew some dust off, and all of a sudden now it's within spec. I hate CPKs, but yeah, just wanted to talk about them. It's something I deal with at my job, and yeah, I thought I could make a halfway decent video that's informational and relatable for me. So thanks for checking this out. I hope my side stories about my job weren't too much, and you still ended up learning something. And until next one, I said see you.